Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is an innovative weekly web series capturing the diverse and colorful lifestyle of Alaskans. Real stories of everyday Alaskans at work and play. Supported in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company.
The National Weather Service.
Good Wednesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 11th of March. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your latest weather information, whether that's online or on your cell phone, hitting any of the social network sites that we offer at NWS Alaska on Facebook, on NWS Alaska, NWS Fairbanks, Anchorage, Juneau. Using the hashtag AKwx will get you to join the rest of the weather community when we're talking about Alaska weather. And on YouTube in the afternoon, of course, you get your daily afternoon map briefing. That happens around 4 o'clock or so. If you look for AKwx TV in the search bar on YouTube a little bit later in the evening, you'll get this complete broadcast, of course. And you can watch that also from the website of our broadcast partner here at Alaska Public. Just go to alaskapublic.org. Weather.gov/Alaska is easy to find online. The weather info line is also pretty easy to dial up, 800-472-0391. Write down the numbers you use to find your forecast, and the next time you can just go ahead and punch them in without having to listen to those voice prompts. Let's get on to your Alaska weather now. Lots going on across southeast with warm and wet air lifting northward across the eastern Gulf. The focus for precipitation and the big weather maker is going to be on the eastern side of the Gulf for our friends in southeast again. That means snow is probably already falling across northern sections of southeast and will continue to pick up as we head through tonight. So if you're in Haines, if you're in Skagway, got plans to go up to Klondike Highway, guess what? It's going to snow in some cases as much as a foot one more time. At least before we're done with winter, you're going to get some more snow out of this. So winter storm warnings up around the Klondike Highway, and that'll take you into from about midnight until about 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon for those areas. And the snow level seems to be about 1,000 feet or so. So once you get at or above that level, visibility could really drop off. The winds probably won't be too bad, but any blowing and drifting around is going to reduce visibility further, especially with snow falling throughout those passes there and along the highway. Now a little bit further south, that includes Juneau and out toward Gustavus and into the northern sections of Crosstown. We're not talking about nearly as much snow. However, snow is probably falling in your area as well already. It looks like snow totals could be on the order of 3 to about 6 inches of snow. So a winter weather advisory is in effect for you. That starts at, that's already started, in fact, and will go until about 7 o'clock in the morning. So for areas around Juneau and northward toward Gustavus, winter weather advisory until 7 o'clock in the morning. Northward tonight starting at midnight for the Klondike Highway and areas around Skagway and Haines. We're talking about a winter storm warning that will start at midnight tonight and continue onward until 4 o'clock. That'll be where the heaviest snow is expected, especially around the Haines border and along the highway. Let's look northward a little bit. The yellow shaded areas around the upper Koyukuk Valley and out across the Tanana Valley, we're still talking about winter weather advisories for kind of a wind chill index issue. It looks like temperatures could feel like 45 below thanks to a little bit of the stronger gusts blowing through that region. Gusts may work up to about 45 miles per hour in some of the ridge tops there in the passes. It's not going to be for everyone, but when the wind blows, it is going to make it feel exceptionally cold, at least for a little while during tonight and into tomorrow morning. So wind chill values of 45 below. Gusts could reach upwards, of 25 miles per hour, not 45, 25 mile an hour gusts, 45 below wind chill for the winter weather advisories again that'll go through tonight and into tomorrow. So if you're in these regions, the upper Koyukuk, upper Yukon, and also southward toward Tanana, be prepared for kind of an exceptionally cold night and early morning tomorrow. Here's a look out to the west and the Bering Sea. Well, guess what? The ice has grown about 30 to 35 nautical miles southward just in the last day or so. according to our sea ice desk analysts there. We'll talk about the sea ice map in just a minute, but if you look carefully here, you can see that northerly flow coming down the coast. This is some really cold air, and as it works down the coast, it's also helping to grow that ice edge and also move that ice edge at the same time. So again, that ice edge has shifted southward about 35 nautical miles or so from where it was analyzed yesterday. Low pressure south of Petropavlovsk continues to work northward. That is bringing warm and wet air into the western Aleutians. Southerlies not quite as strong as what we were talking about yesterday. Probably low-end gales at that across Kiska and Attu. In the meantime, that cold air continues to spread southward into the North Pacific. With that, we're getting some snow showers up and down the Alaska Peninsula and around Dutch Harbor and Alaska and the eastern chain. That will eventually be replaced by a little bit more of a southerly flow in time, winds becoming west and southwest as we go toward the end of the week there. Across the rest of the mainland, look at this low pressure system. This is what's bringing the snow to northern parts of southeast. You can see that beautiful curl there as low pressure works into the eastern Gulf. That's dragging in colder, drier air, though, across south central. One exception, though, if you look right here, you can see this little plume of cloud cover working its way out of Cook Inlet, across the Barren Islands, and then back into the mix here across the northern Gulf. Along that area, which sometimes is kind of wavering back and forth toward Kodiak, you're probably getting some snow showers out of that. That trend should continue as we go ahead into the next couple days. In the meantime, you can see the winds pushing cloud cover and moisture right up against the Alaska Peninsula. You can also see how the clouds are working their way northward. We think this band of moisture will probably lean into the Copper River Basin and maybe even the Delta region in the coming days. Eventually, this system's going to work its way northward and start sloshing some of this moisture right up against the northern Gulf Coast. So those of you watching from the Kenai Peninsula, say around Seward and Cordova, maybe Valdez, we'll see. But it looks like this system's going to slosh some snow kind of right up against the coastal areas. Probably won't make it a whole lot further west, but it looks like many areas, including Yakutat, will start to see a better chance of snow showers heading toward Friday and Saturday. So this system is on the move, and again, northern parts of southeast are going to see the snow first, starting tonight. Here's how we see the surface weather map right now. High pressure out across the southern Bering Sea sits at 1,036 millibars. Pretty stable stuff. Low pressure is also dragging kind of a trough right across southern parts of southeast, but it also extends north of the Yukon, in fact. And along that boundary, there are some clouds, not a whole lot of precipitation with it. It is helping to drag the winds off the continent, though, and blow that into the colder Gulf of Alaska. Low pressure across the eastern Gulf is sitting at 977 millibars, and south and east of that is where we're finding that warm air. That warm sector is working northward, and as that's moving moisture northward, we're going to see more and more snow developing across northern southeast, while southern areas will be looking at rain. Around Haida Gwaii this afternoon, temperatures had topped 50 degrees in some locations there. That's the kind of warm and wet air that's working northward. High pressure is also sitting west of the Gulf of Anadyr. That's at 1,037 millibars. The combination of that is helping to encourage colder air into the interior. And for those of you on the North Slope, you know temperatures have been pretty chilly the last couple days. Barrow today made it up to, I think, 5 above. So colder stuff for you and maybe seasonably appropriate finally. Tonight's forecast shows low pressure still west of Sitka at 980 millibars. There's the warm, wet air showing rainfall across central and southern southeast. Rain will change over to snow for areas further and further north tonight. And again, some of that heaviest snow for the Haines and Klondike highways and Skagway region could top out around 12 inches or so, especially above 1,000 feet. To the west and for the mainland, it's mainly clear night. That means cold weather for the middle and upper Yukon Valley as well as the Brooks Range. A few more clouds up across the North Slope, but right now things look pretty dry there. A patch of cloud cover working westward from Tanana out across the Seward Peninsula and northern Yukon Delta region as well as the lower Yukon Valley itself, but things look fairly dry there. A better chance for snow showers around the Barrens and northern and eastern sections of Kodiak Island as well as the Alaska Peninsula. And westward, the next disturbance already moving in with southerly flow running into colder air. That probably means snow for areas across Kiska to Attu and maybe mixing in a little bit closer to the front. As we get into Thursday, low pressure will continue to work its way northward, heading for the Alcan border in areas a little bit closer to the mainland. That means rain for many areas in southeast. Snow will gradually change over to rain further and further north toward Cross Sound, but it looks like at least through a good part of the afternoon around Haines and Skagway and generally north of Juneau, that cold air is going to hang on, and with that we expect to see snow to continue throughout the day. A winter storm warning continues for the area until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. For places like Juneau, your lighter amounts of snow are brought to you by that warm air ending the snowfall possibilities in your area. So right now, Juneau and places like Gustavus are still talking about 3 to 6 inches of snow, and I'm sure that forecast will continue to be refined as we go through tonight and tomorrow. Around the Barren Islands and the very southern tip of the Kenai out toward Kodiak Island, we're still watching for some snow showers with that nice little flow of moisture working its way right out of Cook Inlet. Across the Alaska Peninsula and westward toward the Pribilofs and north toward St. Matthew, you'll start to see a better chance of snow there. And the frontal boundary continues to work eastward toward the central chain. That also is bringing it rain mixed with snow at times as that warmer air spreads eastward. Most of the mainland remains dry, but look for some snow showers to develop around the Copper River Basin. A better chance of that happening on Friday, in fact. With low pressure sagging a little bit southward, the central circulation will kind of break off from the main area of low pressure that continues working northward into the Yukon. With that, we expect to see those coastal snow showers that I was talking about. And meanwhile, southeast is still dealing with periods of rainfall there. Northern parts of southeast may still be looking at some pockets of heavier snowfall. As we get out across the west and south of the Pribilofs, snow showers will still be an issue if you're out in the Bering Sea looking southward toward the Aleutians. A frontal boundary will start to work its way in a little bit more from the south and west, and eventually this will fall apart as it runs into a fairly stable area of high pressure that extends all the way into the Gulf of Anadyr. Across the north slope, a 1,020 millibar ridge high pressure system sitting up across the north will continue to keep things pretty dry and stable across the lower and middle Yukon Valley. We might run into a few snow showers as you get a little bit further west and south thanks to the trough of low pressure rotating around this overall circulation here in the east. But for most areas in the interior, the story will be cold and dry and probably clear for most areas. For southeast, it's going to be increasingly warm and wet with a better chance of heavier snow in the north. And in the west, just unsettled with another boundary working through and an opportunity for maybe some lighter snowfall around the central Aleutians. Otherwise, snow showers and minor accumulations around the Pribilofs. Pretty much what you would expect for late February and into early to mid-March. Here's where we see temperatures this afternoon, 20s and 30s for most of southeast. There's that warm weather I was talking about in Haida Gwaii up to about 50 degrees there. Upper 20s for Juneau today. Sitka was in the upper 30s. And the further south you go toward Ketchikan, Craig, and Klawock, we saw readings back in the mid to upper 40s. Around Prince William Sound, teens and 20s there, 24 in fact in Homer today, 17 for Kenai. Anchorage was cool at 15. The same goes for Talkeetna up toward Denali, Healy, and Greeley, anywhere from 5 to about 10 below, 6 below in Fairbanks, 2 above in Eagle. Northway was showing 1, about the same there in Fort Yukon. Up around the Brooks Range, Anaktuvuk Pass saw temps around 20 below today. Arctic Village was only 11 below. Anywhere from 20 to 30 below across the North Slope, including Akasuk at 27 below. Wainwright was showing 33 below, 18 below in Kaktovik. Kotzebue Sound temperatures were a little bit milder, but not by much, anywhere from 15 to about 25 below in Kotzebue, 6 below for Nome, and Unalakleet was showing 7 below. Galena and Huslia and Ruby all looking at temperatures below 0 today. Tanana was about 0. McGrath was also sitting right at 0 around 2 or 4 o'clock this afternoon. Bethel was 2 below. Nunivak Island was 9 above. And a look further southward into Bristol Bay, temperatures hovered in the plus side of 0, but only in the low to mid-teens. Kodiak Island in the upper 20s and lower 30s on either end. The Alaska Peninsula generally in the mid-20s today. The Pribilofs were in the mid-20s, St. Paul at 25, and just above freezing for the west and west central Aleutian chain there, all areas at 34 for the stations. Tonight's low temperatures show most areas will stay well below 0, and in fact, winter's cold is setting upon Fairbanks out toward the west, with most areas anywhere from 15 to 25, even 30 below around Fairbanks tonight. The clear cold weather, as long as that's in place, will encourage that cold thanks to high pressure sitting up north and channeling that upper level flow right into the heart of Alaska. The North Slope will be looking at temps from 30 to 40 below. Thankfully, the wind is not blowing very much there. We'll talk about that with your marine weather coming up in just a few minutes. Across southeast, 20s, 30s, even a few areas holding in the 40s thanks to that warm, wet air lifting northward tonight. Cold weather will sit just in the right place for Haines and Skagway, so look for those readings near 20 tonight for the chain. Overnight lows in the 30s with highs tomorrow closing in on 40. Many in the interior will nose up on that 0 degree mark. Looks like Nome will sit at 3 below with Fairbanks at 1 below. Bethel 3 below, and the North Slope looking at temps from 20 to about 30 below. Southeast in the 30s and 40s, a few coastal areas closer to 50. South Central in the teens with Kodiak Island at 24. Flying weather shows IFR conditions across all of southeast tomorrow and kind of hit and miss out across the west. Otherwise, it's MVFR building in across the Alaska Range and some pockets across the eastern and northern interior, and also coming out of Cook Inlet tomorrow surrounding Kodiak Island. Your pass conditions show MVFR increasing around AKwx Pass and Adigan Pass throughout your Thursday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will also lean over toward marginal conditions. Rainy Pass, we expect to see marginal conditions develop throughout your day, as well as Windy Pass starting out at VFR. Isabel Pass should lean over toward MVFR conditions as the day goes on. Mentasta Pass will likely stay there through most of your Thursday. For Tanita Pass, expect visual flight rule through most of your Thursday. Portage Pass looks to be okay, maybe a little breezy at times. And Chilkoot and White Pass, obviously with snow coming in, we're going to call that IFR at least fairly early in the day. The warm and wet air is lifting freezing levels up to about 2,000 feet. The snow line again hovering around 1,000 feet according to our friends in Juneau. The surface freezing line though is now south of the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern chain. Icing potential generally above 2,000 feet in the western Bering Sea. Most of that will remain fairly isolated. Above 4 to as high as 8,000 feet crossing over the mountains. Look for light to isolated moderate. Most of the issues today were fairly isolated as well. Your jet stream shows that trough sitting right across the North Pacific and the Gulf. That is encouraging colder air out of the Arctic and allowing that to move right along the west coast and into the heart of Alaska. And that's where wind speeds pick up from the south and west to about 100 to 110 knots. At 9,000 feet, a very similar pattern here. You see our northwesterly flow dragging cold in. Wind speeds are a little bit faster over the Gulf tomorrow, 40 to 45 knots. Slower across the eastern interior, faster across the west with 20 to 40 knots there. And wind speeds slow down across the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians until you get way out to the west, and then we get back into 50-knot winds. Those winds also pick up at 3,000 feet there. You can see the winds from 30 to 60 knots, a little bit of a southerly flow across the central chain. Wind speeds in the interior at 3,000 feet, blowing in from the east and northeast at 20 knots and coming into southeastern Alaska between 40 and 50 knots there, so a little bit stronger eastward as well. Turbulence potential, we would expect most of that to be in southeast tomorrow, generally below 10,000 feet as that frontal boundary and low pressure system are lifting northward. Some isolated chop along the southern parts of Cook Inlet, north and east of Kodiak Island, and also in the southern areas where the gap winds are a little bit more likely to form, and across the central chain, generally below 10,000 feet, maybe some occasional moderate there. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back in just a few minutes with a look at the sea ice edge and your marine weather. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the land of 10,000 smokes, a remote location within Katmai National Park in Alaska. 1 century ago, a volcano erupted here with such fury that it leveled a 40-square-mile area. And evidence of that volcano resides today in these walls of volcanic ash, 80 feet high. The volcanic eruption was so powerful, it altered the world's weather.
The ash cloud blocks sunlight to the lower 48, producing an unseasonably cool summer almost from coast to coast. The historic 1912 blast is known interchangeably as the Katmai or the Nova Rupta explosion. No single volcanic eruption since one in Greece 1500 BC is known to have displaced more volcanic matter. 80 miles southeast of the blast site on Kodiak Island, Alaska, it is still being talked about almost a century later.
I remember my mother just telling me how black it was, dark, for 7 days, you know.
7 days.
7 days.
Wow.
Lifelong Kodiak resident and village elder Thomas Frost Jr. has heard about the historic explosion all of his life.
Well, see, the wind was blowing from the west, so if it was blowing the other way, it would have went to Japan.
A bright summer day on Kodiak Island suddenly vanished behind a black cloud of ash, captured approaching the island in this photo by a Kodiak mailman who was on a boat.
On June 6, 1912, at about 1 p.m., there was a large blast that was heard as far away as Cordova.
To put it in your perspective, if the eruption happened in New York City, people in Chicago could hear the eruption.
On the island itself, there were about 500 inhabitants preparing for the commercial salmon fishing season, and they were literally engulfed in darkness as this ash continued to fall.
Thunder and lightning, almost unheard of here on Kodiak Island and in this part of the world, arrived ahead of the ash cloud. For one 60-hour stretch, the cloud was so dense, the area was plunged into total darkness. It was said you could hold a lantern up at the end of your arm and not even see it.
Kodiak native and Harvard PhD, Dr. Sven Hawkinson.
I mean, can you imagine having your entire world just covered in ash?
No.
And no contact, and not knowing where it's coming from, because there's no volcanic activity here on the island.
When we dig in the ground here down through the last 10,000 years of record, the Katmai is the largest that we see. And there are only a half a dozen or so that are similar to it in the last 10,000 years. And the most recent of those is about 3,000 years or a little more.
This is just a wonderful marker for us as archaeologists because it's so clear, it's so distinct, and so well documented.
The volcanic ash was everywhere. It even penetrated walls. Imagine being inside, as this piano was at the time, and having the ash pile up to a depth of 4 feet against it.
Volcanic ash is blasted rock particles. It's about the size of baking flour. It's highly abrasive. It's not like ash in your fireplace, which is carbon.
If you look at it under a microscope, it looks like broken light bulbs.
Kodiak residents have been treated to the full array of natural forces which shape Alaska. In 1964, Kodiak Island, just like Seward on the Alaska mainland, was swamped by tsunamis.
The highest waves were about 18 feet above regular sea level, and the lowest troughs were considerably more than that. In fact, the bay virtually drained.
Reports of water draining from harbors and coastlines just before tsunamis are common.
And I never believed it, unless I saw it with my own eyes. I looked under it, the channel was dry. There wasn't a bit of water in there. And a few minutes later, here comes the water from the other direction, and the channel's full again.
The 1964 tsunamis shocked unsuspecting coastal communities all over Alaska, and years before the Sumatran quake and tsunami gave the world a taste of one of nature's true horrors. It had to be the same nearly a century ago as the ash cloud enveloped Kodiak Island. In an era before air travel or sophisticated communication systems, residents weren't even aware there was a volcano close enough to affect them, especially one powerful enough to level 40 square miles. The scars are still visible on the landscape today. For decades after the blast, vents spewed steam and gas into the air at the Novarupta site.
It's unfortunate, but the Valley of 10,000 Smokes no longer smokes.
But even after a natural catastrophe of this magnitude, ecosystems bounce back in amazing ways. One of the world's largest concentrations of bears in the wild are here, following the salmon which swim upstream near the Novarupta blast site. And when they eat too much, they dig into deep deposits of volcanic ash for its medicinal value.
The bears use it just like kaopectate that we use it for. They'll dig into the ash for the upset stomachs, eat it, and hopefully help their stomach problems.
It started as a tsunami special. Little did we think we'd see anything like this.
Oh, you got it.
Always a magical sight. And with the cold weather back in place across Cook Inlet, if you're watching the water, you could probably just about see the ice growing. It is extending southward once again, still north of Callaghan Island, but you can see the sea ice is expanding across northern Cook Inlet and will continue working its way southward as long as winds are generally light and temperatures remain pretty cold. Out across the west, once again, the sea ice has expanded or dropped southward by about 35 nautical miles over what we were talking about yesterday. And that means, once again, if you're in that area east of the Pribilofs or out toward Bristol Bay, you need to keep an eye on the ice there over the next couple days because the ice will continue to grow. You can do that anytime by going to weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. The outlook is posted Monday, Wednesday, and Friday there out to the next 5 days. Now, across southeastern Alaska, southerlies will continue up the intercoastal coastline itself from about 35 to 40 knots or so. Look for seas to run around 7 to 8 feet. Across the outer coast, around 40 knots. Seas considerably higher, though, around 20 to 22 feet as that warm and wet air lifts northward. We'll still have some westerlies coming in around Yakutat and Icy Cape, around 20 knots with a 15-foot sea. By Friday, the winds are diminishing in all areas, 20 to 25 knots on the inside, 35 knots around Clarence Strait, and west and southwesterly flow coming ashore. Look for 13-foot seas in the north and 16-foot seas outside of Dixon Entrance. Still talking about some higher gusts thanks to low pressure swirling across the north and western sections of southeast. Across south central on Thursday, north and westerly winds will continue. These are the light winds that we need to continue growing ice across Cook Inlet. Considerably stronger winds, especially in the morning around the Barrens. 50-knot winds there. Those should diminish through the mid to late day. 16-foot seas, though, earlier on with higher gusts in the region. Northwesterlies inside of Prince William Sound with a 3-foot sea. By Friday, those stronger winds are gone. We'll still have some gales around the Barrens. 40 knots there, 12-foot seas on either side. 30 to 35-knot winds on either side of Kodiak Island with a westerly flow in Shelikof Strait. Northerlies in Cook Inlet and inside of Prince William Sound, and a southwesterly flow outside of Montague Island. 25 knots there with a 10-foot sea. Looking at the Alaska Peninsula, northwesterly winds will be the rule on both sides, 30 knots on the Bering side, up to 35 knots around Castle Cape and west toward Sand Point and Perryville. Look for 12-foot seas there, and we're still watching for some freezing spray. You'll also see some snow showers in the region. Northwesterlies inside of Bristol Bay on Friday, southwesterlies south of Sand Point up to 30 knots with a 6-foot sea there. For the Aleutians, a southerly flow ahead of that weather maker out across the west, 20 to 35 knots with seas as high as 17 feet in the west, and northwesterlies north of Unalaska will bring a 6-foot sea into the region. By Friday, you can see all areas still working with a south and westerly flow, a little bit more southeasterly north of Unalaska. Winds around 20 to as high as 35 knots, mainly in the North Pacific, with a 15-foot sea on Friday. Across the west coast, northerlies coming down the west coast, still encouraging the ice growth there as well. 15 to 25 knots along coastal areas. Northeast looking at, or St. Matthew looking at northeasterly winds at 20 knots with a 7-foot sea, and 3-foot seas around the Pribilofs with a 15-knot wind from the east. We'll watch for freezing spray south of the ice edge as we get into Friday. Winds diminish ever so slightly across the west coast and start to blow a little bit more offshore from the east and northeast. Easterlies remaining a little bit stronger around St. Matthew at 35 knots with a 17-foot sea expected there, especially west of the island. And light winds continue to befall the north coast with 5 to 10 knots in most areas, a general east wind around the Beaufort Seacoast. Northwesterlies coming into the Chukchi Sea at 10 to 15 knots. You'll see a little bit of a variation on that theme as we get into Friday, but in general, winds remain fairly light across the North Slope as we get through the end of the week. Here's a recap of tonight's weather. As far as wintry precipitation goes, it's southeast all the way with a winter storm warning for the Haines and Klondike Highway area and Skagway, up to 12 inches of snow, generally above 1,000 feet. Look for that winter storm warning to start at midnight and go through 4 tomorrow. Winter weather advisories for the Juneau and Gustavus areas there. You may see 3 to 6 inches of snow starting tonight and lasting until about 7 o'clock tomorrow before it gets too warm. Out across the northern and western interior, wind chill advisory there. It could feel as cold as 45 below as we go through tonight and tomorrow, so bundle up. Out across the west, southerly flow works in your way. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.